a vote today, are we?
No.
Do we have a vote on minutes?
Not on minutes today. We just have the vote to approve the agenda. Okay. All right, and it looks like David is joining now. So Kevin, if you would like to go ahead and get us started, we can do that.
All right, I hope everyone's doing well today on a beautiful summer day. We'll do a quick roll call, which is always a little bit difficult. So let's try to just jump in when it makes sense. I am Kevin Conracode. I'm the chair of this subcommittee for the passive recreation land, and I'll pass it on.
Matt Fusco, vice chair.
Ann Babcock, subcommittee member.
Bob Dale, subcommittee member and member of the Buncombe County Land Conservation Advisory Board.
David Burdett, member of the subcommittee for the open space bond and a member of the Buncombe County Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
Amy Broughton, Buncombe County Legal, in case you need anything.
Thomas Goll, I'm the principal park planner with Buncombe County Parks and Rec.
I'm Jill Carter. I'm the open space bond project manager for Buncombe County. I do believe we still have one last subcommittee member, Lena, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Hey, Lena Richards, subcommittee member and member of the Parks Rec Advisory Council.
Great. Well, it looks like we've made it through all our subcommittee members and a couple staff joining the staff. I'm Rachel Sawyer in strategic partnerships, collaborating with Jill on the coordination of the passive recreation lands funding process. Pass to Enwena.
Good afternoon. My name is Enwena Smith. I am the Equity and Inclusion Analyst for the Equity Office here at Buncombe County.
And I think that just leaves Nate.
Hi, everyone. Nathan Pennington here, Planning Director for the county. Hi, Bob.
All right, Jill, is that everybody?
Yes, that's everyone. Sorry, couldn't see.
All right. Let's have a quick vote to approve today's agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
I can't see it all, but I guess.
Do we need to motion that before we vote?
I can make the motion if you'd like the second.
I can second, yeah. I just wasn't sure as far as Robert's rules go, whether we should do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any opposed to approving today's agenda? All right. The agenda is approved. Jill, I will pass it off to you for an update on our project selection.
Amazing. Thank you. So I will be quick with this because I know we've got a lot to discuss with regards to the specific projects. But just to remind all of you for a few updates about our process here, I do believe we have some people who will be joining for public comment. This subcommittee does public comment at the end of the meeting, and we will pause and let you know when that happens, and our communications team will open that line of communication when it's time. So that is at the end of the meeting. Additionally, for our process for project selection, today the subcommittee is purely discussing the projects themselves. There is not going to be a vote on any projects today. After today's meeting, the staff will be contacting the subcommittee members individually for their votes on specific projects. And then at the August meeting, those projects that received a majority yes votes will be discussed further with regards to specific funding amounts. But today there is no vote on approving or not approving projects. It is just a discussion. Additionally, there are a number of staff members on the call. They are here to answer any questions that the subcommittee might have. No member of the staff is involved in actually selecting of the projects or making that recommendation. That is solely a subcommittee prerogative. Additionally, the subcommittee makes a recommendation on projects to the commissioners, and the commissioners make that final decision on which projects to fund. Right now, our intention is for that presentation of the recommendation and the commissioner vote to take place in the first meeting in October of the Board of Commissioners. And then finally, just to walk through kind of how today is going to go, we will go through the projects one by one and give you a reminder of, what this project is. Those subcommittee members who were in attendance at the site visits can feel free to share anything you learned from the site visits. But really, we want to give the subcommittee the chance to kind of discuss the individual projects. If you have additional questions that the staff might be able to answer, please raise those. For your knowledge, we have a member of our parks team, our human rights and equity team, and our planning team on the call. And then finally, at the end, we will break for public comment. So with that, Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move into the reviewing the projects themselves?
No, that sounds like a great overview. And just a reminder to the subcommittee members and anyone else following along, the point of contact is in transition between both Jill and me. And so any reach outs that you do to staff will tag team at this time.
Jill, I know you're going to do an overview first. Do we discuss each one during the overview, or do you want us to wait until you finish?
So the overview will be one by one. So as you all have seen, here, I can share my screen with it now actually, but you all have seen the kind of applications overview document that has come before you a number of times throughout this process, where for each project, we have a overview of the project itself, the average scores that the project received across the criteria, and a description as well as additional notes. So essentially, one by one, I will pull this up. That'll be our chance to discuss the project for you guys to ask questions that the staff will hopefully either be able to answer or help us find a way to answer it later on. But we will go through the projects one by one. Now, another quick comment I wanted to make before we dive into that is our meeting is set to end at 1:30 today. So we have a little bit over an hour to have these discussions. I do need to leave 15 minutes at the end of the conversation for public comment. So that said, as we get towards the end of the meeting, if you all are feeling like you need more time to discuss, I know Bob Turner, who's not here today, he has proposed in the past the option of potentially having a special meeting in early August to continue the conversation. So I just want to make sure you all know that is still on the table if as a committee you feel that's necessary. So take the time you need. We are not trying to rush you. We want you all to have the conversations you need to have. And then we can continue onward with our process.
If it's okay with Kevin and Jill, I'd like to jump in with one other quick comment.
Go for it.
As of now, we have your August meeting as a placeholder for August 20th, which is a Tuesday, from 12 o'clock to 1:30. And it would be good during today's meeting to confirm that. If there's an additional meeting, it would be prior to that. But if there are any proposed reasons to meet at a different time, it would be good to surface those.
So that said, I think Kevin, if you'd like to move us into the next phase, I can introduce the projects one by one.
Certainly. Let's go into project overview, Jill.
Thank you.
Could I actually interrupt for 1 sec? Would it be possible? I know that there was some Q&A, and I know that there's some stuff on each of the projects, but it might be helpful just for the benefit of the group to go quickly through the overall that were in the Q&A that you sent previously. I think there were some questions that would benefit us as we're considering these. And then I would like to make one comment after that.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. I guess as Matt mentioned, at our last meeting, we asked that the subcommittee members reach out with any questions they had about specific projects or about the process. And then myself and Rachel sourced answers to these questions rather, and I shared them in a document in advance of this meeting. So there were a few questions that kind of related to the overall process of the passive recreation lands application window. The first was whether or not, if the committee does not award all of the requested funds. As you'll recall, you have roughly $10.4 million remaining in the bond. We've received, with an adjustment from the town of Woodfin, $3.6 million or $10.6 million, I apologize, in funding requests. So they're not the same, right? Obviously. So money can be remaining afterwards if you choose not to award all of the funding available. So if that is the case, does the commission still have the flexibility to allocate the remaining funds? Or would money be held over for a next round of funding requests? The commissioners always have the prerogative to, say yes or no for what the funds are being used for. They are the ultimate deciding factor for the bond fund allocations. That said, if you all decide to not recommend the full $10.4 million, you can, include a recommendation in your recommendation of projects of what you think should be done with the remaining funding. The commissioners are not obligated to follow that recommendation, but you are allowed to say, whether you think it should be held for future rounds or another purpose, you can make that as part of your recommendation. The second question is, are we going to require an appraisal so that we are paying proper value for land? Yes, if the project that is an acquisition project is approved, there are a couple of those in this round of projects. If there's a project that requires the county to acquire a piece of property, we would require an appraisal and we would go into contract negotiations. So the funding amounts that you would be setting aside are really more of a placeholder for that purchase of land. But any purchase would be based on a formal appraisal and negotiations between the county and the land owner. And then finally, does the organization rewarded have the capacity to use the funds in the time window of the bond? And what are the recourses if we exceed that time window? As you all know, the bond rules require that we allocate all funds by 2030. They do not have to be spent by 2030, but they do have to be allocated. So therefore, if a project is not slated to be completed until 2032, that is still okay as long as we have allocated the full $30 million by 2030. However, we don't want projects to necessarily drag on indefinitely, of course. So in our contracts, we would require, a project timeline. And if a project needs to adjust that timeline, they would have to go through like a formal amendment to the contract itself. So that's kind of our way of protecting ourselves and making sure that we're sticking to a reasonable timeline.
Great, thanks. And the only thing I would add is, as I was going through these proposals again, I started thinking a lot about passive recreation. Just wanted to reiterate the definition of, according to different resources, and it's non-motorized outdoor recreational activities such as nature observation, hiking, biking, canoeing, kayaking, et cetera, that require a minimum level of facilities and or development in order for those activities to occur. So I felt like that was helpful for me as I was reviewing these, because I know that there's a lot of different scope and intention with these projects, and I thought it might be good to share with the group.
Thank you, Matt. So with that said, and with those kind of overall questions answered and y'all having those responses in mind, I'll go ahead and start reviewing the individual projects. The first project on our list is the roughly 33 acres on Sand Hill Road. If you'll remember, this is a piece of property rather, along the Hominy Creek off of Sand Hill Road. And the proposal for this project is that the county would acquire the land and be able to use it to develop a passive park. One potential use of that would be possible extension of the Enka Heritage Trail, as this property does line up with the proposed endpoint of that trail. The property includes a total of 33 acres. The funding request is just over $1.6 million. Again, this is a straightforward acquisition proposal. So therefore, if the county does, or if the subcommittee does want to move it forward, and it is approved by the commissioners, we would have to go through that formal appraisal and negotiation process for the purchase of the property. But that $1.6 million was based on, comparables and estimates for kind of the value of the land. So with that, I will pause for questions and conversation. And Matt, you were present at this site visit, so I also invite you to lend your thoughts from the site visit for that project.
Is that to me? Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we went out last week and took a look at everything. It seems to be in alignment with the Greenway plans. I would have a question for the county as to what study has been done beyond that, between the end of this parcel and eventually tying in down at South Bear Creek Road. Some other considerations would be that and this doesn't necessarily change a lot, but there is a Dominion gas easement, and they've done some stream bank stabilization on the property in the form of modified type walls. There is an MSD easement across the property, as well as a Duke easement across the property. So those are just notable. It's not necessarily a plus or a minus. It may affect appraisal. There is discussion with the Riverkeeper, French Broad Riverkeeper and Mountain Through about restoring a portion of it, and that has had conversation. It sounded like it was pretty well set on what wanted to happen, but they don't have any signed agreements on that. So that would add to a little bit of complexity. But again, I don't know that it affects the validity of the project. And those are the only things that came up for me. So overall, it's floodplain land. It would be suitable for Greenway. It would directly connect to the Enka Heritage Trail from the ball field side that's either under construction or soon to be. So just at face value on the ground, it looked like a reasonable project, with the understanding that there would be negotiation and appraisal and all that.
Yeah, I have a question. It's been used as a farm, a tomato farm. Is there any issue with any type of contamination on the land from the farming usage?
He indicated that they are an organic farming operation. So unless there's some issue as far as when they go through the appraisal or purchase process that comes up, it sounds like they're using it in a way that is not going to be heavily impacted in terms of pollutants. But that may be something that the county wants to follow up on if they do move forward with the purchase.
Having worked at Mountain True for all those 25 years and working with the French Broad Riverkeeper, I'm sure that if they had if that's the organic farm, that's great. No problem with nutrients so much, but if there was any concern with erosion, they would be focused on trying to fix that. But I haven't talked with Hartwell Carson, but apparently bank restoration is what they're focused on, and that's to prevent erosion at the banks themselves and to replace vegetation there. So I'm pretty sure that is what their main concern is. So I wouldn't imagine the farm itself is causing any major problems to the river. The only other thing I'll throw out, thanks for that, Matt, because I wasn't able to be on that visit. So that's great that you were. I'm just raising Robert's question before he went off to Europe, since he's not here. I think one of his questions was, would it make sense to spend so much money on this property when it can't be developed? It's in a floodplain, and would it be better to just remain as farmland? But I don't know if the owner is economically able to continue to do farmland on there in perpetuity or anything like that. So it's always good to get land protected in perpetuity. So, but anyway, I just wanted to float Robert's comment on that one thing that he wanted us to just know about or consider. That's all I have with regard to this. It does provide public access, and it provides riparian protection from a larger entity than just the private landowner. That's about all I can have to contribute on this one.
Yeah, and I had some of those same thoughts, Bob, and I guess my general thinking is, it wouldn't be available for a significant level of development if it were to remain in the private. It doesn't seem like with the easements and floodplain and all that. However, if it does provide that connection to be able to ultimately tie into the existing sections of Hominy Creek that would then get us down to the French Broad, and it is a part of the long-term planning for the county in terms of greenways, master plan, and that type of stuff, then it rises a little bit for me. And for better or worse, with the number of easements and being in the floodplain, I would think that I'm not a real estate appraiser, but that number would probably align itself in terms of the final value based on some of those conditions, which maybe does make it more palatable for the county. And, I couldn't feel comfortable saying, yeah, 1.6 is great for this, but I could feel comfortable saying that with a qualified appraisal and the information that we know, they would know, that it would land in a window where it could be good for the county if it aligns with their programs. So I think seems to me that it would, but I did not study between the end of what that could potentially bring as far as Greenway and tying into Hominy and then French Broad. And I'd say Hominy Creek Greenway where it connects over at Sand Hill Road.
Maybe Thomas Gull could answer where it connects on the other side. I know on one side it's the Heritage Trail. Would it connect to anything existing on the other side?
I think the goal would be for it too, but anything at this point would be super theoretical. There's been to my knowledge, I've only been here a short time, but to my knowledge, there's been no official feasibility studies for anything connecting specifically the end of this parcel on the east end with anything that happens further to the east. However, that ultimately would be the goal. As far as this parcel itself, there's a pretty significant connectivity to neighborhoods just to the north of that particular parcel that would be great in providing connectivity to the Inca Heritage Trail and into Buncombe County Sports Park. Yeah, but to my knowledge, there's been no official feasibility studies of connecting anything to the east. However, that would obviously be the ultimate goal if the county were to purchase this and build a greenway on it.
Are there any other questions or main comments anyone wanted to make on this project before we move to the next project?
I just want to make sure I get a clarifying, basically we're purchasing the land for the idea that it might be used later. Like,
yes.
Okay.
The county
Go on, Jill.
I was just gonna say the requested funds are solely for the acquisition. And so that would go towards the county's acquisition of the property. And then it would be kind of up to the county, you know, with public input and all those things of, you know, what that development of the project looks like. But this proposal is solely for the county's acquisition of the project. You know, that said, it has to be used for passive recreation purposes, per our, you know, requirements of the bond.
I think one of the notes in the staff notes, I can't see it, but maybe scroll down. It did indicate that they had the capacity to manage it, I believe.
Yes. So it would be a county managed and maintained property.
I've got one more comment, and that is probably the only application that's in the western part of the county. Is that correct?
We have a application for a project in Woodfin and one in Weaverville. So I guess those are more northwest.
Yeah, they're more north.
And then
Yeah.
Beaverview,
So I'd say that's the only
And
one.
Beaverview, thank you, Rachel. Beaverview Mountain is also in the western part.
Well, yeah, okay.
Which, on that note, the next project to discuss is Beaverview Mountain, which this is also an acquisition project. As you all have heard previously, Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy has been raising funds to formally acquire 345 acres on Beaverview Mountain. With that acquisition, the Conservancy would transfer the property to the county for the development of a passive recreation park on the property. The county has allocated roughly $7.7 million in bond funds towards those improvements. However, this $1 million that they are requesting is towards the acquisition cost of the property. And so it's $1 million to kind of go towards completing that acquisition from a private landowner that they've been working with. And again, it's 345 acres in the Beaverview neighborhood. And this is another acquisition piece. And Bob Gill was there at the site visit, if you'd like to share any thoughts, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I'm pretty impressed with this project. It's got really important equity issues. I know Mountain True has worked in the Beaverview community. Has been very concerned about equity there, and this is right. Totally offers access and that connection, which would be very good. The view shed is incredible. So it's got that incredible view shed when you look out from the top of the property. It's an important acquisition to prevent for future development. I can't remember all the details, but the people that the Highlands Conservancy have been talking to and all there is a possibility that the owner would develop if it doesn't go into acquisition. It might not be a massive development, but he would develop properties there. And Jill, correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but there's definite possibilities of that because he is a businessman, even though he is offering a good donation and helping them to hold on to this until the decision's made.
Yeah.
A bridge.
This individual is holding the land for a set amount of time with Southern Appalachian and basically allowing them to acquire it from him at cost with, you know, interest built into that as well. With the understanding that if Southern Appalachian is not able to meet that timeline and meet that funding requirement, he would look to potentially developing the property into a residential. I can't remember exactly how many residencies he's talked about, but larger parcels, residential neighborhood on top of the mountain, if Southern Appalachian's not able to raise the funding for acquisition.
And the other notable thing about this piece of property is that the Highlands Conservancy, as you all know, most of you know, I think they've been around longer than any land trust here. They've got a great track record. They do their homework. They get sources of funding from every possible place they can, and they're very good at it. They cannot come up with the $1 million, which is the final amount needed. And if they can't get it, they wouldn't be able to acquire the land. So this is, to me, a sort of an urgency thing that we should note. That's basically it. It's a wonderful piece of property on the mountain. People have gone there for years because the landowner had been in absentia, doesn't live around, and has allowed that. So it's a very well-known place and has been used, and it's got some wonderful forest on it, as well as a pollinator meadow, which is it was attracting all kinds of great insects, I noticed while I was there. So anyway, there are those aspects of it too. So that's probably the best summary I can give of that. If anybody has any further questions, I might remember something I've forgotten.
So Jill, just to clarify again too, I think you read out that if we acquire the property, the commissioners have already committed money to then do more
Yeah.
to it, correct? Okay.
The commissioners have voted to approve $7.7 million towards the development of the park on Deep River Mountain.
If they're able to purchase the property, obviously.
Yes, yes.
I would just like to say that I visited it some time ago too with a member of the Southern Highland Conservancy, and I was totally impressed with this piece of land as a potential park, a potential great new park for that part of the county.
Just another note I know this has been in kind of some of the presentations and conversations that you all have heard, but just another note that the county parks team has been working with Southern Appalachian. We applied for a federal grant that could also go towards the acquisition costs of this property. That said, that application, we won't know if we're invited to apply until later this fall, and then we would not know if we were successful, if we are invited, until early 2026. But I just wanted to make sure you were also remembered that kind of piece of the puzzle.
And Jill, that acquisition funding that's built into that possible federal grant application would be used by Southern Appalachian to repay a loan that they're currently including in their financial stack in order to come up with enough money for the acquisition, right?
Yes, they have a $2 million bridge loan towards the full acquisition costs of Deep River Mountain. And so what they stated at the site visit was their intention would be, if we do move forward and are successful with that federal grant, they would use that funding to repay the loan.
And I will just add here that a slight point of clarification is that the Parks Department has been asked to work with them, so we've happily obliged, because we do see the potential in this particular piece of land as a great community asset. I will just say that there's a lot of moving pieces with this project still, and we're still trying to understand if the ORLIP grant, which we're applying for, can actually be applied for to retroactively then pay back a loan. It's not clearly understood yet whether that is feasible. We're trying to get answers on that as quick as we can. We're dealing with the feds through talking with the state So you can kind of play telephone up and telephone down and realize how long that kind of takes. But yeah, just a few points of clarification there on the kind of complication of this move as we move forward.
Thank you, Thomas. Any other questions or comments on Beaverview Mountain? Okay. The next project is Gateway Park. This is a project being brought forward by Riverlink. And this is a project along the French Broad River. It's approximately 1.2 acres that will be kind of the public use aspect. For idea of location, this is the piece of property that kind of goes along the railroad tracks across from the French Broad Outfitters up to just about near where the Getaway Bar and those storage facilities next to the Getaway Bar are. So that kind of long strip of land between those two properties is where this one exists. And so the Riverlink owns this property already, and they are seeking $200,000 in bond funding for improvements on the property, including invasive removal, the development of some trail systems and some like archways and signage along the property as well. And I invite David, who attended that site visit with us, to add his thoughts from that site visit.
I don't have a lot to add. I think my takeaway is it's going to be tied into the entire river walk, obviously from all the way up in Weaverville. When it's all finally done, after 26 is done, it would connect all the way down to Amboy Road. And the design's really nice. It was hard to get a feel for the property because it is really overgrown. It is. We were able to walk along the train tracks because you can't actually walk through the property. So I think that's what the majority of the money is going for, is to clear a pathway so they can create a kind of a walking trail. I mean, it has potential. I mean, they all do. So I mean, I can't say anything bad about it. It's not a large. I mean, it's a large piece, but not a huge piece of property. But it was hard to envision because the railroad tracks are right there. It's kind of surrounded by congestion. I will say that. I mean, I think eventually that will all be worked out in the plan with the continuation of the bike trails and things. I don't know if Matt has any questions for me or anything.
I'll just comment that having walked in places like that around here over the decades, I can imagine what you're describing, David. And I'm sure there are a lot of non-native invasives. Riverlink has experience in doing control work for invasives or through volunteer groups. And I've worked with them a little bit in the past myself. So that jungle of growth can be conquered, and good things from it. Quite often when we get rid of invasive plants that have been taken over an area, you usually can do restoration planting, and they are capable of partnering with, or doing that themselves, or partnering with Asheville Greenworks to do that sort of thing, I think. But quite often when you get rid of the invasives, I've found in an area that's been neglected for a long time, and maybe hasn't been so altered back in history, there are native seeds and tubers and roots that literally have waited for decades for a chance, and they start popping up. So you get a lot of natural vegetation. So I'm not saying any of all of that will happen, but I'm saying that is a positive note on trying to turn an area that's bad into good. Quite often nature helps us.
It's a mild concern. I think it's a concern of anything you build down there. There is a lot of traffic. I mean, a lot of traffic. That it's where the Pearson Bridge is. And so while we were there, we probably saw 50 cars. That's not a reason not to do the project. But that's a concern of anything you build on the river. I'm not sure building, we're going to get less traffic. I think traffic will just increase with more activities for people to do on the river, but it was quite impressive, the number of cars. But I will also say it was like close to 5 o'clock too. So it was probably more 5 o'clock traffic too. But it was quite busy while we were down there. And that's not a knock on the project. It's just, it isn't a busy part of Riverside Drive and down there.
That may be a plus.
Right, yeah. Well, I to add to that, Ann, I think it does provide a respite in an area that does not have any real stopping points at this time. And that's not to say that when 26 and Riverside Drive get rebuilt and all that, there wouldn't be more, but it does provide, it's kind of starting to create the fabric to hopefully gain momentum to start keeping going north. There are some gaps between that site and Amboy that, are somewhat questionable right now, and having that on the ground in a location that's along an alignment that's been planned for seems to make a lot of sense. I do think there should be some consideration as to whether or not the plans for the Riverside Drive have any impact on the improvements that might be made. It doesn't seem like they do based on the information provided, but it is a design build project as far as 26 goes, so that's something to consider.
Well, I think it's a small ask for a possibility of a big impact for that part of the Greenway.
I don't know if this question can be answered today here, but I don't know if it's what you're saying, Matt. But I'm curious. I mean, I know where the 26 connect, the new 26 is going in. But once they finish that and they have to go back and kind of redo Riverside Drive, is there a time frame on that? I'm curious if we approve the money and then they had to yeah.
I don't know that I can answer specifically, except that my understanding of the project right now is that they're going to be doing the aerial work for the 26, but they'll also at the same time be improving Riverside Drive so that it can become the conduit when they make the connection for the aerial support of 26 back into the alignment. So conceivably that could be happening as one of the first parts of the project. They've already torn down that warehouse that's down closer to White Duck. That was a DOT activity and it's been fenced in. So there is some movement. It seems to me that the alignment is pretty well set and there shouldn't be any major surprises at that intersection. So I personally wouldn't anticipate a major impact to this park, except for, access and traffic when they're doing construction on Riverside Drive.
And Jill or David, you may remember Riverlink pointed out something on the map when we were at the site where the sort of the access, the future access that would be to the walkway or bikeway wouldn't be added initially. So the interior work of the park would occur. And then when the Riverside Drive improvements occur, then they would add that connection, something like that.
No, I think you're right, Rachel. I think if I remember correctly, the archways were kind of set back a little bit to allow them room to, I think it was built into the plan so that they could adjust to whatever the new roadway looked like. Like they were going to be able to tie in once it was done very easily, I guess.
Yes, that's correct. Great.
Yeah, I'm looking at the plans right now. It doesn't, and I can share my screen if you want me to, but I don't think it necessitates that because it looks like all of the Riverside Drive improvements happen within the existing right of way as it's being shown. So I don't think it would the Riverside Drive improvements would directly impact anything that they're proposing with inside of their property.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. All right. The next project on our list is the Haw Creek Park Greenway. This is a 1 acre property in the Haw Creek neighborhood. They're requesting $102,000 in bond funds towards the establishment of a kind of greenway trail that would go through the property. They also are pursuing an easement through a private property that abuts the Hominy Creek Park property that would allow this trail to continue onward through that private property. And just to give you a sense of where it is, this is at the bottom of the Hominy Creek Park, which is a city park. And the one end of it connects kind of across the street from the Penny Cup Cafe and the Creekside Tavern and the Whale Outpost, that little shopping area right there. So this is across the street from that and goes along the bottom of Hominy Creek Park. And both Bob Gale and David were at that site visit. If y'all have any thoughts to add.
I think you inadvertently said it was near Hominy Creek Park, and you meant Haw Creek Park. That's okay. Just want to clarify for everybody else.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look at this as a really positive project in a local community where the community is very engaged. The donor of that's proposing to donate the land and the acquisition, he is gung-ho all aboard on this. He was on our site visit. The community, there is a beautiful forested tract that they got protected from a development, I think 10 or so years ago. And the first thing they were able to do was to get the Haw Creek Pavilion built and picnic tables, that kind of thing there. But they've never been able to do anything along the creek down at the low end. And it's got they mowed a place for us to walk through, but it actually has a very good, it would be a very good trail to add. And in this part of East Asheville, there is nothing really like this. It goes through good forest. There's lots of invasive plants, which they are aware of and knowledgeable about some of them. And they're asking me a lot of questions based on my knowledge. They have a good volunteer base of people, and they're communicating with the Hominy Creek people who have a good history of volunteerism in cleaning up their area on invasives. So they've done a lot of homework, and it's a pretty reasonable request compared to a lot of these that we're facing. So those are all the points that I made. I noted, and I was impressed with the engagement aspect of the local community there. And David, maybe you have other things.
I don't, Bob. I think you pretty much, said, exactly agreed. They seem to have a lot of involvement. The landowner who's giving the land is super excited. I mean, he wants to do this. And I'm with you, Bob. It's a very small request. And it will extend that walkway so that they're tied in between Haw Creek Park and this small walkway. I mean, I will say that, it's a smaller impact because it's a smaller community and the trail doesn't, it'll just be, people could park at the top of Haw Creek and be able to walk through a forest. That's the part that I think it's hard to see maybe on a map or something, but it would make it one continuous thing. And again, I live in Haw Creek, and Bob is correct. There in my backyard, I have some trees, but there's no like park that you could go walk through unless you have to kind of leave the neighborhood a little bit. And so it is, and I think they contacted Haw Creek and Bell so that they could both schools could use the park. And they're both extremely close. I mean, very accessible for the schools. Haw Creek could walk down there from the school. So it impacts more than just the community, I guess.
Was there any discussion of parking? You mentioned a little bit about parking, David. I had that as one of my questions. What would be
I actually did. I did, Matt. I asked the same question. There's no parking directly to the trail, like right by it, but it connects to Haw Creek Park. So you would park up at Haw Creek Park and walk down the hill. and then you would access it that way.
Got it. And I'd heard also, were they discussing with the city that having them mow it or something like that? Or was there anything that came up there?
Yes, the city would help with some of the like larger maintenance of the project. And because it is part of it is through the city park. So they would be responsible for.
Yeah, I
helping.
think that the first half of it is at the bottom of the Hall Creek Park, so it's part of the park. So I guess they agreed to go and do the last, maybe half of it. Bob might correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed like it was half and half, but the city would maintain all of it since it would be all one continuous park.
Got it. Thank you.
Unless anyone has any pressing thoughts, I'm going to move forward just because I know we're kind of getting on time right now. But now to Hominy Creek, since I misspoke before, we have the Hominy Creek Greenway Trail Improvement is the next project. For those of you who have not walked Hominy Creek Greenway, this is a trail along Hominy Creek in kind of not totally familiar which neighborhood it is, but Rachel, if you know which neighborhood that is, please add. But right now they have done trail improvements on that greenway on the two ends of it, where they have widened the trail in spots, they've resurfaced it, and they've to kind of cover up some of the rootiness and unevenness of the trail itself. But there's a middle section of the trail that is still the kind of original surface that they are asking for $312,000 to go towards the improvement of that section of the trail. And that, again, would include kind of resurfacing the trail, widening it at points. There may be some sections that they would move to kind of allow for the bank to be preserved along the creek itself. And this is another project that they have a relationship with the city for some of the larger maintenance of the project. And they also work with volunteer groups for some of the more regular trail cleanup and maintenance as well.
I didn't go on the site. Did anybody else go on a site visit with you? Okay.
This one was just Rachel and myself.
Okay, I have been, actually, I was involved in that in the very beginning when Mark Hunt led me and another one of our staff members down to look at possibly protecting that area, and they got it protected. They have a long history now in the last several years of community engagement in maintaining, getting rid of invasive plants. They still have a lot to get rid of, but doing that, and it does offer a big erosion control correction or fix because that Hominy Creek has had a lot of different problems with that in certain places. And then Asheville Greenworks has a long history and a good history. So it's good to see their name associated with it, in my opinion. So those are just the things I'd offer based on what I know.
Do we have any idea of what the status of the condemnation piece is that the city's looking to condemn?
Yes, so they actually, shortly before the site visit, they did get an official easement on that piece of the greenway. So they do now have, I guess that is a more secured part of the greenway, and that condemnation legal pressing issue for it has been resolved.
I think that's good news, at least in my evaluation. And then I think from the discussion, they had not gotten a design for reroute yet, but it was going to be somehow done through donated services. So I don't know that that's a huge problem for us, but it didn't sound like they had that part worked out completely yet.
That is my
That's just a comment.
I would imagine, given the connection with Trails people, Asheville Greenworks, and the couple of people that I know involved in that greenway or that live near there that are involved, that they know enough to contact or partner with expert trail builders who understand trail design and erosion control and that sort of thing. I don't know that, but just knowing the people kind of involved, I can't imagine they would build a terrible trail.
Yeah, and I'm not so much concerned about that, but I do think in the requests that it did indicate, not for engineering services, design services. And if we are in a situation where we're worried about funding entire amounts, I don't have any reason to believe they wouldn't be successful, but it is a loose end that's not been tied up yet that we should consider.
Yeah.
One clarification I'd like to make, just for your knowledge, is so Asheville Greenworks is listed as the applicant because they did submit the proposal. They are the fiscal agent for the Friends of Hominy Creek. The Friends group is who will be actually, if the project is awarded, they are the ones actually managing the project itself. So Asheville Greenworks is more of that kind of like fiscal pass-through agent for the funding.
I'd like to speak to the lack of funding for the trail design or restoration. Is that something that we could say it's like a potential project? I had written down that it's 8 to 12 months to secure the funding, and that seems like a long time to wait.
One option might be if there's a majority of subcommittee members that want to see this project included in the portfolio, is to, when it comes time to talking about those details, make it contingent on having met certain milestones, so that if we find ourselves moving into the contracting phase on this project, we could create it following the guidance that came from the subcommittee, meaning holding back the funds unless and until certain other fundraising is in place.
So that's an option for us?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good information, Rachel. Thank you, because that relates to something we'll be discussing later on. I was thinking about.
Yep, got it. Typically, the contract negotiation piece gets into some technicalities and is managed at the staff level, not at the committee level. However, some of those bigger sort of strategic statements related to a project can be given to us by committee as we enter into that contracting process.
And I guess only something else we should consider here is that we do have a connection already. The relocation would be nice and probably is necessary, but it's not like the trail is not functional without it. You can traverse that segment of trail currently with no problem. So I guess that's something we should consider in our review as well.
I like the idea of making the funds available contingent on them getting the plan.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
Great. I'll move us to the next project unless there's any other pressing questions or thoughts. But the next project is the Warren Wilson College Trails. They're requesting $141,000 for improvements on their trail system that they have. That trail system includes both like natural surface, single track trails through their property, as well as some access roads that they have on the property itself. The majority of the bond funding request is towards the improvements on those access roads, and they have kind of an in-kind match, is what they're calling it, of the student labor for the maintenance and improvements on the trails, like the single track trails through the woods. Yeah. That's thoughts and questions. Rachel and I were the two who attended that site visit.
I would like to say that somehow we could tie it into making sure there's an easement for the Fonta Flora Trail along that part of it.
I don't know what the what the reality of that is, I will say, I know we did speak about the Fauna Flora Trail, and the individual who gave us the site visit was he's like the land manager for the college, and he was generally supportive of working to get the Fauna Flora Trail through part of the property. But obviously that there's a lot kind of future steps that would need to be taken to get there. But one caveat on this project is our Ag and Land Resources team is currently working with Southern Appalachian Highlands for putting a conservation easement on the property. And so the property will be, protected through that conservation easement, if it's approved by commissioners and goes through that transaction process as well. But this is for the improvements on the trails themselves.
And Anne, what they would be committing with accepting these funds, should we get to that stage, is the guaranteeing of public access and public use, which is something that would be a new commitment for the college for this private land, although it has been informally open to the public. This would formalize that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They've for many decades, they've allowed the public to use their trails. They haven't had the means or funding to probably design or redesign or maintain some trail parts, and their focus has been on their college and their agriculture and their forestry and all of that. It seems like their history has shown that they've been open to public access, and they're deserving of our consideration for much needed improvements. And they definitely are capable of, if improvements are brought up to speed, current standards for trails and various erosion control, they clearly are capable of maintaining that through equipment and through students, because everybody probably knows that their students do so much community work, and they do hard work, and they do that kind of work. I've actually supervised a lot of Warren Wilson students on my own projects over the years, and they're very good. So it's a continual supply. But by them getting that land in conservation easement, there have been times, like many private schools, where they were in some sort of financial difficulty for a while before they worked out of it. And this takes a lot of that off of their docket. So they're they would be even more. I have no lack of confidence that they can maintain any improvements that are funded. That's my point.
And I'll just add to that. One of the points that I noted in their request was that they've got a significant amount of money in heavy construction equipment. And what that would do is allow them to get to a point where their trails are maintained to a current standard. We hope that they've run their numbers correctly, but assuming they have, and like Bob said, the work crews are part of the curriculum over there. So they're dedicated crews for those types of activities. And I think that's notable. So it seems to me that they've got their ducks in a row in terms of how they would manage it. The connection for public service would be something that I think was it a quarter mile or is it a mile? I don't remember what that was. That's the only thing that comes to mind outside of the questions already brought up.
Yeah, all those the capacity to do those things and the equipment they have in all students. That's probably why their ask is really fairly low.
Matt, I'm not sure what the exact distance of that road is, but I can source that answer and get that back to the subcommittee if needed. So, the next project that we have, and I am gonna just note that we have roughly 10 minutes before I need to pause for public comment, so we may want to call that special meeting in early August. But the next project is the Ridgecrest Connector. This is in Black Mountain. This project was proposed by the town of Black Mountain, and it is for the development of a path connecting from kind of the downtownish area of Black Mountain out towards the eastern part of the town. They're asking for $705,000 for this project. It's an improvements project. And Bob Gale, you attended that site visit. If you have anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, I admit to being a little biased, sort of not against it, but when I read the review and everything, and there was a lot of sidewalk construction, and but I will say, having walked the site with the official, and Jill, you have to remind me her name. She was, pardon me?
Jessica Trotman.
Jessica, that's right. She clearly was experienced, very knowledgeable, had done her homework, and has searched for funding from many other sources, and has pretty much exhausted her sources of funding, and therefore they thought this might be a possibility. I will say that once I saw the site and saw where it was going, I was a lot more understanding of the request and how it would fit this our bond. They are trying to connect their greenways and public access to a major parcel they have on the other end of town, and a little bit well, it's in the town, I guess, but it seems like it's a little bit out of the mainstream of everything, definitely. And it's a forested tract where they would like to have more trails. There is a great need of it. It goes right in front of the school, and it would definitely provide that connection. And also there's an equity point here because for an older aged community of people that have lived in homes and all for many, many years, that are not your average, high-ended or wealthy or whatever you'd call it, people that come to the area and move in and buy property. This is an older community that has no access to anything like this. And I think that was a pretty significant thing for me to have learned too. So the other thing is, I've specifically asked all these people on these site visits, can you do this in phases if you aren't fully funded? And they said, yes, we would just start with this point and hope that in the future we can get more funding to extend it to the next, to the next, to the next, or whatever. So they are totally able to just accept partial funding. So those would be my takeaways. And I don't know whether Jill or Rachel, you heard anything that I haven't reported on that might be of use for the committee to know.
Bob, you went on mute. Just so you know.
Did you hear me say, do you or Rachel have anything else to add? Financially or whatever.
The only thing that I have to add is that I know one of the subcommittee members asked about the engineering study for the project. It is not currently funded. The applicant did express that they are still pursuing funding, and for that piece, and based on their success, they may, pursue kind of a lower touch study for the project itself, but that they are committed to the project and making sure that they have some sort of study or plan established for it. And they are understanding that the bond will not fund an engineering study.
So this could be one of those contingency type of decisions we make too, if we supported it.
Bob, in your discussion of, I've heard a lot of people say sidewalk, and my understanding that it was only going to be portions of it that were in the city adjacent to a curb that might be a sidewalk width. But when I think of multi-use path, I think of 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, not a 5-foot sidewalk. Was there any discussion of that? Because the terminology that I read in the request is that it's multi-use, which gives me the impression that on the long section from Ridgecrest into, say, where the Tractor Supply is, would potentially be a wider footprint.
Jill and Rachel, maybe you can refresh my memory on that, but my understanding that it would be wider. It would be wide enough to fit the requirements of a greenway.
Okay, yeah.
They're also talking about maintaining this little grass strip on the immediately next to the road on that side of the walkway.
Oh, here it is. So the proposed multi-use path they're showing is 10 feet per their documentation. So when I think of that, I think it aligns directly with passive recreation in that it allows multiple uses. It's not just a sidewalk. So I guess when I hear people say sidewalk, it seems like that might not be entirely accurate when they're requesting for a multi-use. From what I've seen occupying or passing through that area, it does provide connectivity for a number of different neighborhoods and a connection to what would be the Fonta Flora trail alignment over time.
That's right.
I think those are notable considerations, even though it's not maybe a little bit outside of the box in terms of the fact that it has to be adjacent to the roadway. I think that's just something to consider.
And Matthew, there was
I think I used the term sidewalk when that was one of Robert's concerns that he wrote to us. Is it's just a sidewalk?
Yeah, which I would say it's not exactly.
In the presentation they did, we could go back and reference, there are some areas that would be a little bit narrower than that full width that you're talking about. And then they had talked us through some creative solutions to try to make sure that it's as accessible and safe as possible without being at the full width. But most of it is that width you were describing.
One of the things that they talked about was that it is supposed to connect to a future park. What kind of guarantee would it be that it's going to be a park to connect to? Is that something that's on the radar for Black Mountain or Ridgecrest? I mean, otherwise, if it doesn't become a park, then what does it connect to?
There is, so it's not an endpoint of the trail, but there is a property that the town owns kind of across the highway ramp, I guess, that they have plans to turn into a park, and they would connect. They basically build a connection from this Ridgecrest connector to that park when it is developed. But that is still my understanding is it's in early stage planning. And the original inception of the Ridgecrest connector would not yet connect to it because that park is not developed at this point.
Would that be part of the engineering study that they're hoping to get money for?
I do not know. I can ask about that. I believe they're planning, they have like the park is a different project that they're following a different process for. So I don't know that the plans for the park would be part of the engineering study for the connector, but I will clarify that and get that information to you as soon as possible.
Yep, my understanding is that potential.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ann.
No, I was going to say, again, this could be one of those grants that is contingent on getting the money for the engineering study.
Yeah.
Yep. And to respond to your other portion of that question, Anne, my understanding is that if there's a future park connection, that's sort of a bonus to the core connection that's offered with this project, which is the Fonta Flora Trail. And Jill and Kevin, I want to offer a time check. It's 1:16. We have not made it through all of the projects. How many are remaining?
There are there are 5 left after Ridgecrest Connector. So subcommittee, if you would like to move to say that you want to have another special meeting to continue the discussion, we do need to pause for public comment because we do have a number of people online for public comment. So if you would like to schedule or have a special meeting to continue the discussion, I can follow up with you all over email regarding scheduling that special meeting and making sure it aligns with your schedules, but we
I
do
would
need to.
move that we continue the discussion at another meeting.
Okay. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'd second.
Yeah, I second. Okay.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? All right, Jill, it sounds like we can go ahead and schedule a second meeting.
I do want to just, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say thank you for considering that. And depending on what Bob might be offering in a sec, we will probably want to look first to the 30th, the 6th, the 13th. Just looking at this sort of Tuesday midday has been something that tends to be workable. So those would be what we pitch to see on a poll for people's availability.
When does Bob Turner come back?
He returns, I think, the first week of August.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have him be involved.
Yeah.
If he has good questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'll refer back to his dates that he's out, and I'll follow up and see if a date that would work for him also works for the rest of you, and we can get that scheduled as soon as possible.
And for anyone following along, we'll post that on public input once it's scheduled.
Yes. Kevin, would you like to open up public comment?
All right, let's move forward to opening up public comment.
Before we pass to communications and public engagement, I wanted to offer a quick note from county staff. We have received a number of emails directly to staff regarding a project that we didn't get to during today's conversation that will come up during the next meeting, which is the Weaverville Watershed Project. The method for the public to communicate with your subcommittee per your bylaws is to use this time right here that's built into your meeting and be invited to speak for up to 3 minutes per person. So we won't be reading aloud the emails that came in. However, I will say that heading into this meeting, we had 4. It looks like 1 more maybe came in, so 5 total. Folks have emailed us, none in favor. So these emails are in opposition, either in whole or in part. Potential elements that they're in opposition to related to the Weaverville Watershed Project. So I wanted the committee to be aware of that before we move into the individual comments.
And I should add that because I met one of the people who sent the email, I guided her to going to Jill and Rachel rather than through me. I have since gotten emails from the other people who we're probably going to hear from. They're very concerned, but they're not all totally opposed to the park. But anyway, I'm glad we're getting that. This is a very good thing, the public participating. And I welcome them. And they do have one very legitimate complaint in my mind, but other ones are not so. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out to you all. I'm privy to this, but I didn't answer any of them because I didn't think I was supposed to. I've let it all go through Jill and Rachel.
Thanks. And so process-wise, we're directing them to use this avenue in this meeting and in your future meetings as well.
Thank you, Bob. And so we will open for public comment. Angelica, you might need to help guide us through this process, but just a reminder to those speaking, you have 3 minutes to speak, and we will need to stop you at 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica Tyler. I'm with the county's communications team, and I'm facilitating our phone bridge today. So if you are in the queue, I can see that you're there. I'm going to enter you in one at a time, depending on how you lined up in the speaker queue. There is a few second delay. So as I gate you in, you'll hear a prompt letting you know that your mic has been unmuted and you can now be heard by the subcommittee. It is very helpful if you are listening on like a computer or another device to go ahead and mute the video of this meeting. Otherwise, you're going to get some feedback as you start to talk because you're hearing yourself. So go ahead and get yourself ready to mute your mic. And if you want to see what is being said, you can turn on your closed captioning, but not mute your mic. I'm sorry, mute your speakers. And I will let you know if we can hear some feedback. All right, I'll start gating speakers in and I will keep time. And if you're getting over on time, I will let you know that you're about to be turned off.
Angelica, should we be hearing anything?
Gated 2 speakers in so far, and I haven't had confirmation on my back end that that's worked. I'm gonna wait and let people call back in if necessary, but it looks like the system's refreshing, so please bear with me. Sorry about this. I'm getting a message from my system that I'm having some speaker errors. I'm gonna keep trying, but it sounds like there might be some issue with phone connections.
As a backup plan, we do have the contact information of those that have reached out to us so far. Staff can send a follow-up response, making sure that they hear our apologies for the technical glitches and are offered the opportunity to connect at the next meeting, which we'll test between now and then.
Angelica, do you have guidance on whether we should keep trying to patch people in, or we should send this apology and update for on next steps?
I am happy to send an apology and next steps. I have screenshotted the phone numbers that are waiting in the queue. I'm also screenshotting some of the back end issues to deal with our vendor who makes this phone bridge possible. So hopefully I can get some guidance between now and our next meeting to allow virtual public comment. I am so sorry, you all. We've had this system for quite a long time and we have the capability to do this, but for whatever reason, I'm hearing from folks that they're not able to unmute even when they're prompted to through the system. So I'm not sure exactly what's happening on that end. Looks like it's not quite working the way expected. I'm very sorry, and we would absolutely send some follow-up on how people can send in either or how they can participate in public comment next time.
Great. Thank you, Angelica. Again, everyone listening who joined for public comment, we are very sorry that our system is not working the way it should right now. We will follow up with you to let you know next steps and how we can make sure your thoughts are heard, as well as those dates and times for the next meeting. We'll be sure to reach out. But as Angelica said, we have the phone numbers of those of you waiting to speak, so we will make sure that you are reached out to directly. But with that, we are at approximately 1:30. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for August 20th at 12 p.m. But I pass it along to Matt, or to Kevin rather, sorry, to take us through the end of the agenda.
Certainly. Jill, could you forward their concerns so that we can make ourselves knowledgeable on them before we discuss that project in our next meeting?
Let me speak with, or Rachel, it looks like you were about to.
Yeah, as a matter of course, if the committee would like to request that, we could compile what's come in and send it to you in a batch. It's tricky to do as just like an ongoing thing. Staff wouldn't want to initiate forwarding to our committees, but I think that request, I hope Amy is still listening and is fact checking what I'm saying, our attorney, but based on a pre-consult with county legal, I think we're good to forward you that information that you have requested.
Yeah, I second that request because I think it would be good for everybody to see their concerns.
And Amy's that we are okay really on that front. So I've already compiled all of the comments that we've received and will continue to do so. So I will share those with the subcommittee.
Excellent.
Good.
I appreciate your hard work, everybody. Meeting's adjourned. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And sorry for the folks